Hey there, BWP Nation. We're just about to get to part 2 of our Stone Cold Steve Austin 3-parter. But before we do, we want to take an opportunity to say thank you and encourage you all to check out ATB Financial. They are Edmonton's largest homegrown in-house financial institution, and they pride themselves on taking care of all of their clients. How do they get to do that? They take the time to know you and your family and your guys' hopes, dreams, and needs. You're not just a number. You're not just a statistic to ATB Financial. They want to get to know you and they want to help you. They offer traditional banking services as well. They offer you some help with investments, and they help you reach your goals of perhaps home ownership or working towards retirement. So check them out, ATB Financial, on the World Wide Web at atb.com.
This is Best Wrestling Podcast with your hosts, John McDonald and Matt Fitzgerald. And it begins now.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Best Wrestling Podcast. Excitement in the air as we're doing part 2 of the Rattlesnake, Stone Cold, Stone Cold. I'm the Jim Ross to this man, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Jonathan McDonald. But here's the main event. Here's Mr. 316, Matt Fitzgerald. Matt, what is going on?
What's up? I'm fired up to do part 2 of my iconic hero and childhood mentor, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
If nothing else, if we don't win Podcast of the Year next year, which we probably will, we will definitely win biggest Stone Cold marks.
Yeah, I think we definitely got both of those in the bag.
So let's jump right in, man. We left off at the end of 1997, and a lot of things happened there which would change the course of history for Stone Cold. As 1998 gets started, Austin's entering the Royal Rumble, and he's got a target on his back. But he would enter and he would win the event. And as Mike Tyson would call him, Cold Stone, takes the Rumble and is going on to WrestleMania. As a kid, even though I was still in mark mode at this time, to me, this was a really obvious outcome. Not complaining. The right guy won, but to me, there was never any doubt.
100%. Like, I think this is, you're really starting to see where the whole pro wrestling world started to change and it started to go into the mass media. And so clearly the bright guy won because it was the catalyst for what was going to become some of the biggest impact that the industry ever had known.
And speaking of impact, there was a mainstream buzz surrounding what happens the next night on Monday Night Raw when Stone Cold and Mike Tyson have a little interaction, to put it lightly. Stone Cold flips the baddest man on the planet, the Bird. Mike Tyson pushes back. Little trivia for those of you who aren't aware. When Tyson pushes Austin, bricks of cash go flying everywhere. Mike Tyson is famous for carrying around just bricks of money. I think his currency's in like, hey, here's 2 inches of my brick. Anyways, when he pushes Stone Cold, money goes flying, and his handlers or his followers, whatever you want to call them, scramble to pick that up. But man, I remember this stuff being on TSN Sports Desk, as it was called up here. And that was just so unheard of at that time.
Yeah, I remember watching some WCW documents. Maybe it was the rise and fall of WCW or just some of the Monday Night Wars on the network. And one thing that Eric Bischoff was talking about was when that happened, that's when he thought to himself, oh no, like I'm in serious trouble.
Yeah, so even ABC, NBC, all the major networks and their nightly news would pick things up. And Mike Tyson's going to be involved in WrestleMania as a special enforcer. He would join DX in the weeks leading up to WrestleMania, and that would kind of seem to stack the deck against Stone Cold. But at WrestleMania, after a very good match and a heroic performance by Shawn Michaels, giving Stone Cold the favors despite having a really hurt back, there's a swerve, and Mike Tyson slips into the ring, counts the 3 count, raises Stone Cold's arm, and actually rips off his shirt, his DX shirt, to go Team 316. And we see a right hand from Tyson to Austin, leading to one of my favorite calls of all time. Tyson, 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 right hands, right hands. And the Austin era has begun. Matt, what are your memories of that? And did you see the swerve coming from Mike Tyson?
I didn't see the swerve coming, but I don't know if I had been 28 at the time, maybe I could have seen it, but maybe not. I think we lived in a world back then where it was a lot harder to see the swerves because we weren't so in depth with the company and connected with social media. I thought it was done just fantastic. I also saw a documentary where basically Michaels was talking about how he was petrified to have to take that punch.
Yeah, with good reason. And, it's been said in the follow-up that Shawn Michaels was a little bit upset because, he may have gotten buried. After all, he lost the match, lost the title, got knocked out, and got a 316 shirt placed on him. But hey, nonetheless, he was instrumental in getting Stone Cold even more over. Stone Cold would go on to battle Mick Foley at the next couple of pay-per-views, but the most important thing in between WrestleMania and SummerSlam happens on Monday Night Raw. Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin are set to face each other in the Raw main event of April '98. It's teased throughout the show. It's going to be Austin with one arm behind his back. The Stooges are trying to train him in some hilarious backstage segments. Jim Ross is trying to discourage him from doing it. And ultimately, it doesn't really happen. It ends in a fracas with Dude Love interfering. But it draws a rating well into the fives and ends WCW's 83-week streak.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Isn't that incredible? Just watching everything build and build and build, and then it all just comes together on Monday Night Raw, and boom, just like that, you get a point or a 5, with the ratings.
I think one thing that doesn't get enough praise and love in terms of WWE turning the tide is Vince McMahon and the Mr. McMahon character, and just how great he was at portraying that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you got to think that everything that happened there was of course Stone Cold Steve Austin, but without Vince McMahon, could you have had the Stone Cold Steve Austin that we had? Those two, it really takes two to tango, and both of them just worked with each other so well. And I feel that they were just a different version of themselves on turbo drive, essentially. But I mean, Vinnie Mac can play that character. There will never be another character like that as long as we live. I mean, obviously we've seen other people try to emulate it, and it just doesn't work out.
One thing I've noticed, I've kind of been going back and watching this stuff in preparation for these shows. And, we all kind of seem to gravitate towards some of the more outlandish, over the top Vince stuff, like the falling off the desk thing and the genetic jackhammer. But one thing I loved about this era was Vince McMahon just didn't full on dive into it. Like at the start of the Austin rivalry in '98, I feel like he's kind of subdued, but he's still like a little bit of a douche. Like he's like, all right, Mr. Austin, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. So he's not like full on becoming like a parody of himself, but he's just really walking that line of hated corporate boss.
Yeah, you know what? You say that so well, because there has been basically it's been more of a comedy act as the years and years went on, and like you mentioned, the parody of himself. But in the peak of that feud, it was more that just jerk boss that everybody could relate with, that just kept you down and was evil, and it wasn't the over the top zany Mr. McMahon that it eventually evolved into. So back then, it's incredible. Just go watch some of those promos that he had, and it was just so incredible how Vince could be such the bad guy that you just wanted to see get his ass kicked.
So Mick Foley / Dude Love's unable to take the title from Austin. However, his next challenger, Kane, is in a first blood match. It's a short-lived reign. Kane would only hold the title for 24 hours. It would be his only WWE title reign, as Stone Cold would win it back the next night on Raw. And more trivia along the way, as we promised, Stone Cold would win the WWE title twice on the Raw after the King of the Ring, and he would win the WWE title 3 times on Raw, the only man to ever do that.
Yeah, because what does the landscape look like right now, Jonathan? How many people win that title on Raw in the last decade?
Yeah, like it feels like it's been a really long time since we've seen that. Like I struggle to think of title changes or WWE title changes on Raw, even in like the last decade, Yeah,
like I can't think of it. It's 2018. I mean, gosh, I can't think of, I feel like that was once again a period of time when the title would have changed potentially on Raw, and it would have been a huge breakout moment, versus now we live in this world. And even, I guess it's not even now, it's for the last 10, 15 years, all that stuff is always saved for the big pay-per-view buy. So it just made it, it just reiterates why it was so incredible to be a fan during this part of Stone Cold's run.
I just want to slip this in here before we moved on, like just to try to give some of our perhaps younger listeners just insight into what it was like to be a huge fan at this time. I remember calling people to say, dude, Stone Cold is going to get a shot for the title again in the main event tonight. And that just seems so crazy to me now. Obviously, we live in the internet and social media age, but if just for anyone out there who's listening to some or watching some classic stuff sometimes, and they hear the announcer say, "Oh, call your friends, call anybody you can." Like, let me tell you, at least on my end, that was going on. Stone Cold would move to a rivalry with The Undertaker as the summer of '98 came to a close. This gave us perhaps the first of many pay-per-views that would have a music or theme song for it done by a real artist. But perhaps this first instance was one of the best. It was AC/DC, and their soundtrack of Highway to Hell was the official theme song of SummerSlam 1998. And they kind of parlayed that theme of Highway to Hell into the angle of Austin and Stone Cold. I remember Hearst being involved and Austin jumping out of it. Just classic stuff. Any particular memories you have of this?
I like, as you're reciting this, it's all coming back to me. And I think they were better back then at being able to have this art of taking music and taking the video montages and just getting you so invested into the product and getting so hyped up. I feel that that's something that I really miss today within the product. I feel that everything that we see today is not like what you would have seen, especially with Austin versus Taker. I mean, Highway to Hell, I mean, what an incredible song to just use to leverage the feud that they were going through and get you so sucked in that you had to be able to watch it.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought that the match at Madison Square Garden, you know, it didn't live up to the hype. And I think a lot of that had to do with Austin and Taker just jamming their heads together early on. And I'm pretty sure Austin had a concussion, but man, that was still a huge main event. Probably two of the biggest stars in the company at that time, and the perfect venue and the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. Austin would walk away with the title there, but unfortunately the next month on Breakdown, he would not. It was a triple threat. Austin, Taker, and Kane, both brothers of destruction, pinned the Rattlesnake at the same time. Vince McMahon is about to award the title the next night, and Austin comes out in a by God Zamboni. And to me, this is one of my favorite Austin moments ever.
When he just comes out and smashes the ring with it?
Yeah, and Austin always seems to have such good luck when he's operating this stuff. Like, I look at that video, yeah. he takes down a light, and the light gets trapped under the Zamboni, but it still doesn't deter the Zamboni from driving out there. And he gets it all the way up to the ring and smacks the ring, and then he just delivers. You know, Austin's not exactly an aerial guy, but he delivers a picture-perfect flying clothesline.
100%. Like, it's poetry in motion. It's also interesting, Jonathan. I remember you mentioning at some point that you can always tell when there's going to be something crazy happening on Raw, or there's some kind of truck going to be driven out because they won't have that entrance ramp.
Yeah. And, maybe it would become a little bit overused as we would go through the years. I don't think so. I always dug it whenever Austin would operate some machinery. So 1998, the title's off Austin. He's quote unquote fired and then brought back. He's unable to capture the title at the Deadly Games tournament. So Austin's one chance, which Vince McMahon would call no chance in hell, would come at the Royal Rumble 1999. A lot of people confuse this Royal Rumble as one of Austin's 3 Rumble victories. It's not, as the Rumble is won by Vince McMahon. Knowing what would come after this, especially at the next pay-per-view, was this the right call? Do you remember being shocked by this? Should Austin have won? Anything you want to contribute when it comes to Royal Rumble 99?
I was shocked by it. Like, that's what I'll say. Like, going back and being a fan, I don't know if I have necessarily like a whole lot to contribute, because I think that it still played into the big picture and I wouldn't change anything. But I remember having the overall sensation of being very, very shocked and surprised. What about you?
Yeah, I didn't think Vince was going to win it at all. I thought Austin was going to win it. So, by those markers, I was definitely shocked. But it's a stipulation that's put up for grabs the next month at St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Matt, I consider you the expert on this match. I consider this match one of your babies almost as much as X7. Talk to me about the main event of In Your House St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Austin McMahon in a steel cage.
Well, a couple of things that really stand out in regards to this match to me. Number one, I actually feel that it's a good match for Vinnie Mac being in it. Like, I got to give props to Vince McMahon and just his ring ability in this match for somebody that obviously is not a full-blown superstar. I thought that it had some pretty incredible moments. Two things, of course, that I want to mention before we get to the main part of this match was that respect for Vince McMahon falling off of that cage onto
Amen.
What would have been like the most unluckiest spot to hit. Because, and so fans, if you're watching, go back and watch St. Valentine's Day Massacre on the network as well. You got the announcing table, which obviously is designed, not to break kayfabe here too much, to implode on itself, but where the vertical piece coming up meets the horizontal piece of the table, you get essentially like an edge. And Vince McMahon, it looks like the middle of his spine essentially like hits the vertical piece. So all of his weight basically goes on that hardest spot of the table. It doesn't necessarily implode so much that if you watch it, Jonathan, I actually think he bounces off of it. And then he comes up and the table implodes on itself. So it's a wonder he didn't rupture his kidneys. So that's one of the things that I remember about that match. And he just took it like a flipping champ. He gets a hit on the head. Austin's got him, bashes his head on the steel, bashes his head on the steel while they're up towards the top of the cage. And Vince McMahon, being Vince, oversells it and flops. And just on, like, it's a wonder that he didn't really drastically hurt himself in that spot. And then, of course, what we get at the top of the match, the big moment is Paul White, of course, the Giant, of course, the Big Show breaks out of the middle of the ring, takes Austin, hurls him to the cage. And much like the greatest Royal Rumble, essentially, the cage breaks and Austin still wins the match. But I've heard Austin on an interview as well, where Vince told Paul White, hey, Austin doesn't sell all that great. So you really need to make sure that you go in and you throw him around, like you handle him hard. And Austin said that he never in his life got thrown up against a cage so stiff before. And he said he was just sore for days and days and days after that. And you go back and watch it. Big Show takes him and hucks him at those. And we're not taking, this is before the chain link fence steel cage. We're talking essentially bars of iron is what he goes.
It's such a creative finish too.
Big time. Because I mean, gosh, when would it have been done before that point? It was. I don't
think it was. I can't think of it. I can't think of a time. So, anytime you can debut a finish or a trope like that, it's really cool. And I think you hit on most of the stuff there. Vince gets color in that match. Am I right?
He does get color. You're right. Absolutely. I like how you say that he gets color. Oh, we're getting technical.
Oh yeah, man. We're working the fans here. So Austin would go on to WrestleMania. It's not quite the most famous match against The Rock at WrestleMania, but WrestleMania 15 against the People's Champ is, I'd say, okay. I think that they didn't quite find their groove that they later would. Everything's kind of off with this match, just a pinch. Just some examples. I think Stone Cold, and this is the kind of person he really is, the kind of guy who wants perfection and is rattled by just any little thing that's off. He leaves his legendary trademark vest at home in Texas. And so he walks to the ring in a t-shirt and his tights, which you can tell. I swear to God, I can tell. Like, it makes him seem a bit off. I don't know if that's just me kind of plugging it in. And then there's also some special referee shenanigans. Like, there's Mick Foley / Vince McMahon involvement. I think it's a good match. I think it's fun. And it's also the return of Jim Ross, but I wouldn't call it legendary. Do you agree or disagree with me there?
I wouldn't call it once in a lifetime. I'll start off with that. But I thought it was a great match. Obviously they went on to do better, which is great. And it started the story of what was to come for their second and third Mania match. But I would agree with you. I don't think it was what maybe it could have been. But of course, as we go down the history books, we find out that they were able to not only top that, but cement themselves as the best Mania match of all time. So I think that it does a really good job paving the road to where, of course, the story was going to end up.
So I would actually venture to say, fans, if you're looking for a better Rock and Austin match from that year, the next month at Backlash, they do over the WrestleMania main event, and I actually enjoy that one more. It has a classic spot with The Rock, who was in this phase of doing commentary and video of his own matches at the time. Awesome gimmick. He's videotaping a portion of the match while he has the upper hand. He's on the announce table and he turns the camera around. Some guys say it's cheesy. I don't. And he catches a glimpse through the camera of Austin recovering, flipping him the double bird and giving him the stunner. So I just actually like their Backlash match more, and I encourage you to check it out if you haven't. Stone Cold would once again lose the title to The Undertaker the next month, and that's at Over the Edge. Then for the months of June and July, Austin's involved more with a CEO storyline that sees him become the boss, and this leads to some hilarious vignettes of Stone Cold being the leader at Titan Tower. Do you remember these?
So refresh my memory a little bit more. What one would this be? What vignette?
This is around June of '99. Stone Cold's telling like the front desk secretary to stop saying,
man. Yes,
exactly. Tells her to answer the phone with, "Who the hell are you? What the hell do you want?" Make sure that there's beer at all the board meetings. My favorite part is he's looking at all his salaries, and he finds Mick Foley's. He's like, "Damn, add an extra zero to that. That guy needs health insurance after what he's been through." It's just like,
isn't there an episode or a vignette, Jonathan, where like he's in the back sitting down with, I'm trying to like recall, my memory's vague. Like he's sitting at a table with somebody who's maybe like an intern or like a male kind of pansy-like character, and he's teaching him how to type, or like, what am I trying to recall here?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think he worked with he worked with like a bunch of Poindexters and tried to toughen them up. Man, it's really, really good stuff. So if you want to check that out, it's got to be like some Raws like around June and July of 1999. It's just, once again, we talked about this on the last show. A lot of the greatness of Stone Cold was just as much out of the ring as it was in the ring.
100%. And that's why he was just so well-rounded. He was just so great in the ring. He could get so fired up, but boy, could that guy just entertain. Like the entertainment is oozing out of that guy.
And speaking of well-rounded, I'd have to use that adjective to describe our new home, the Alberta Podcast Network. Would you agree with that?
Man, I absolutely would agree with that.
They are home to a plethora of awesome podcasts. I was just talking about one and having a back and forth this weekend. There's a lovely, lovely soccer podcast. If you're into that, not everyone is, and I appreciate that. They've got podcasts on business and networking. You might be a little bit familiar with that, not to break kayfabe here. They've also got stories from people who have left Alberta and have come back. They've just got everything that you could want. Of course, they've also got sports, and they've also got sports entertainment. Alberta Podcast Network. They're on Twitter. Check them out. And we are really, really proud to be on the network and to call the place home.
Amen.
So 1999 ends with Stone Cold Steve Austin doing a clean job to Mick Foley at SummerSlam in a triple threat, being unable to recapture the title from Triple H. And then at Survivor Series of 99, that car just ran over Austin. That car just ran over Austin. I know they used a stunt double. I want to give huge props to WWE, though. I did not notice it, and I thought it was really, really well shot.
I actually didn't. If I'm hearing you correct, that actually wasn't Austin that hit that car?
That's correct.
See, I didn't know that at all. I thought for sure it was Austin. So clearly they did a really good job.
I think WWE has always been good at that stuff. This was no exception. I didn't really know this at the time, but as I read more and more of wrestlers' books from around this era, Vinnie Mac is sent into a state of panic. In the fall of 99, you got to consider this. The Undertaker is gone for a long period of time with a serious injury. And now Stone Cold, your biggest star ever, is also gone for what looks to be a year. The neck stuff from Owen Hart has finally caught up to him once again, and he's going to be on the shelf. He's going to require some surgery. Man, I can totally understand Vince McMahon being really nervous.
Yeah, 100%, especially when you have all these people that are just dying for this product, and you're in a world where you're winning and you're crushing it and you're on top and you've got this incredible momentum. I mean, it must be just so exciting. And you have the fire that's just going forward. You don't want that flame to go out. And now you got these two incredible top superstars that are these massive draws. And of course, to their own right, they got to go on the shelf because they're injured and you don't want them to be hurt. And so it can definitely be a bit of a pickle. I think if I was in Vince's shoes, I'd be full of anxiety as well and taking a few Prozacs maybe.
So from my perspective, I remember I didn't, switch the channel or become less of a fan. I found that The Rock and Triple H. So I know on my end that I stayed around. I became a huge Rock fan in Austin's absence. I thought his stuff was really captivating. But I know you, and I'll admit it, are the bigger Austin fan of the two of us. So was his year-long injury something that made you tune out?
Honestly, no. But I'm a huge Austin fan, obviously a huge Austin mark. But during that period of time, I was digging everything that The Rock was doing. I was digging the whole Triple H bit. I liked the whole I did it for The Rock and all that jazz that came afterwards. And so I don't really feel like I missed a beat at that point. And I think it's because, it was a good product. And of course, this was the era of when the product was the best overall. And I thought it just set people up and the transition was seamless.
So that takes us to the end of 99. Of course, there are still more to come. We've got part 3, the final part of Stone Cold Steve Austin's WWF career coming up. And that'll take us from his return in late 2000 right up until the end of his in-ring career in April of 2003. Before we go, though, I know this show has been one hell of an exciting podcast. But Matt, could you just let the fans out there know, if they don't already, about another exciting thing we've got going on, our BWP Takeover contest?
Absolutely. And so, friends, if you've been watching us on Instagram Live, you know exactly what we're talking about. But if you haven't had the opportunity, check us out on our Instagram. And of course, check us out on Twitter. Check us out on Facebook. But myself and Jonathan, we've been having a lot of fun engagement with people on Instagram over the live platform and letting them know about what we are calling BWP Takeover. So quite simply enough, all you got to do is give us a review and a rating and then screen capture it. Take that photo and you can tag it, BWP in it, like on your Instagram. You can put it in a tweet to Twitter. You can even DM it to us, but you got to get that screenshot to us somehow. And then you're going to be entered into a draw and you get to take over the podcast. What that means is you can tell us what pay-per-view to talk about. You can tell us what questions to ask. We're going to do a lot of really, really fun things. It's already been exciting. The reviews and the ratings we've gotten so far have been fantastic. So be sure to follow us on Instagram so you can take over BWP.
Excellent, my friend. Hell of a promo on the contest. And I just want to let everybody know that we're up and running on Patreon. That's exciting. We are there at patreon.com/Best Wrestling Podcast. Looking forward to perhaps getting your support. Maybe you want to become a patron at one of the 3 tiers we have available. You can read all about the exciting exclusive stuff you get for becoming a patron. Once again, it's patreon.com/Best Wrestling Podcast. We're available wherever you get your audio sports entertainment, ours being the best, of course. It's in the name and all. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher. Check us out. We're on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is at Best Wrestling Podcast and Twitter is at Real BW Podcast. So much going on. So much to look forward to. Part 3 of Steve Austin's WWE career will be here before you know it. So it goes without saying, Best Wrestling Podcast. What? I said Best Wrestling Podcast. What? Oh, stop it. It's only just begun.